Hey folks, I made a video a while back in which I was talking about my belief based on some evidence that what we are observers and nothing more. In other words, we're not the instigator of our actions. We're not the motive force behind what we do. We simply observe what we do and we identify with the process. And there was a few people that thought that the way I presented that made some sense. So I've been thinking a little bit more about that, about consciousness and how it develops. And it occurs to me that one way of hypothesizing about this might be to think about the way the retina works. Essentially, the retina has a bunch of cells that are going to process information. And when it processes the information, the light that comes in as photons of different frequencies and different intensities, different numbers of photons, is processed to an enormous degree. In other words, you have a number of cells that will look at, for instance, a line, a dark line, a light line, what angle it is, what the contrast is, whether it's moving in the visual field, variations, and all sorts of variables. And somehow this type of processing developed because it's more useful to the brain for how things are going to work. And it occurred to me that the same thing may have occurred, I think it probably did, as far as consciousness. In other words, you have creatures that have no knowledge of what they're doing. They are just acting by stimulus and response as a result of selective pressures that have lead to certain advantages for those that behave in certain ways, and then those genes are going to be moving forward and others will not. But then what happens is, in order for this stuff to become useful, you need some sort of processing, because the more processing you get, the more information you can get out of the information. Just like the NSA wants to use metadata and all this other data and shove it all in the computer and operate on it in all these different ways so they can get more information out of this, I think the same thing might have happened as far as consciousness. So that what would happen is, instead of that conscious entity developing and taking control of things, what happens instead is the most optimum types of processing are going to result in an experience in which the observer appears to be doing something. And why would this happen? I think it would work that way rather than you would have to have somebody doing something and then working backwards. You would have this processing that creates an awareness of doing, awareness of future actions. Because what can happen then is that if you can look at yourself as an entity, as some active force, you can process information better than you could otherwise. Now, you could say, well, that's kind of a no-brainer because, after all, it is what it is, and if you're making the supposition that we're just observers, that's the way it would naturally come out. But there's other ways that it could come out. So what I'm getting at is that by optimizing the way that information is processed in a way like the retina, and I'm saying that the retina is not necessarily as optimum as it can be. Nothing in biology is. Everything is fucked up, but it works incredibly well for fucked up systems because of the way evolution works. But what would happen is that the best way to further process this information would be to would result in the formation of this awareness and identification. So, okay, so what I'm thinking is it just happens that way. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily profound or sort of trivial. It's just one little step. I want to think about this some more and see where it goes, and I would like your comments on it. Anyway, I'm watching on my iPad the HBO series, The Game of Thrones, and there's a great line, better than the one I'm going to read you here, that I made up about what I'm talking about here. But anyway, they're marching into battle, and they say, "That which is dead can never die. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. I'll let you think about it. But it's kind of cool. This is less cool, but it has to do with what I'm talking about. And then I'll wrap this video. One way to change is to watch yourself change. See ya.